today we're here to talk about Oxfordshire's visitor economy, the then, the now and the future. But just by way of introduction, a very brief introduction, those of you that know Experience Oxfordshire, we are the destination management organisation for the county. We run a range of services varying from Oxford Visitor Information Centre, Oxford Official Walking Tours, but also have a wide-ranging partnership network from across the visitor economy of about 200 partners, do a raft of marketing and PR, and also government liaison, national lobbying, and really trying to make sure that we are working to grow and develop and nurture Oxfordshire's visitor economy in the most productive way. And I think that's probably where we should start our journey. So if you had the PowerPoint on your screen right now, you could see some of our contact details, and we'll come back to that. But what I would now be showing you is actually a raft of images which actually shows you that, you know, things haven't always been perfect. I think we've always thought of Oxfordshire, and Oxford in particular, as a real hub for tourism. But the reality is it hasn't always been managed well or managed effectively. So if we rewind back to 2015, when I came into post in this organisation, I was at some of the amazing positivity that I was getting from businesses around, this is great, we're full, we're at capacity, tourism is booming. What had happened is over the past 10 years, so from 2005 to 2015, actually tourism hadn't been growing in the most productive way at all. What had been happening is every international market, apart from France, including our biggest inbound market, which is the USA, had declined. We weren't in the top 20 for a domestic day visit. Visitor sentiment was ranked really, really poor. So there was a perception of a lack of good visitor welcome, a lack of access to heritage assets. And at that point, obviously that was pre-Westgate, having a very poor retail offer. Also, there was a supply and demand issue whereby we didn't have enough bed stock to meet the demand of the overnight visitor. So what happened was, you know, the rates in Oxford and across the county were really high, but the reality wasn't always living up to the experience, because if you're paying £400 or £500 a night for a bedroom, you're expecting good things. And that sort of gave us real mixed consumer confidence. One was we were really expensive to come to, so people are just going to be a day visitor and not stay overnight because they can't afford it. Or two, they were going to come and not have the best possible experience. So really, I think there's a bit of a reality check around that time to say, actually, we've been very complacent. We haven't been performing how we could or should be doing. And we haven't been competing well with other destinations across the UK. So what we then look to do through addressing a range of issues, and from the image you would have seen previously, you know, there are issues around traffic management, coach parking, large tourist groups. Through the team at Experience Oxfordshire and our board of directors, we were delighted last year to launch our ambition statement for destination management across Oxfordshire. And we've just started to work really hard on that. And it was all around getting the most productive type of growth across Oxfordshire's visitor economy, talking to locals to make sure that they feel involved and engaged, creating exploration of our heritage assets, addressing issues like seasonality, because this is a whole nother debate, and certainly not for this 20 minutes, but do we have over-tourism or do we have seasonality? And it's absolutely the latter. We need to spread that tourist season. And we're really looking to work with partnership, instill pride in place, and in line with government measures, have that increased economic value of 5% year on year. So how did that look in growth terms? Well, so for Oxford city centre, we're welcoming 8 million visitors a year, which had an economic value of £900 million and supported over 15,000 jobs. And if you go on to the next one, please, Richard. And from a county-wide perspective, that actually showed that we had a huge volume of economic value coming into the county, which was worth £2.3 billion a year to Oxfordshire's economy, and was supporting nearly 39,000 jobs. And if you go on to the next slide, please, Richard. And really what that was showing, it was important, it was significant to the sector, and we were moving everything in the right direction. And as you can see from this slide here, we were actually exceeding that 5% target year on year. We've done really well with growth in the past 5 years, and we're really set to move on to that and really look at that growth, development and productivity issue in terms of the city and the county's visitor economy. The ambition statement was a key part of that. We were getting great traction with the local stakeholders and our local partners. And then the next thing happened. This happened. So it was something that wasn't in any of our risk registers. Quite frankly, if any of us could have planned for this, we would have been worth an awful lot of money. And one of the industries that it hit hardest and hit first was the visitor economy. So this was the thing that happened, and this is what we were starting to see across the city and the county, which was very unusual and not what we were used to seeing at all. The majority of visitor economy businesses had to close down, and were closed down by the 23rd of March. So that put the visitor economy in a really challenging and really vulnerable situation. So next slide, please, Richard. We were moving from seeing these images on the left to seeing these images on the right, which isn't anything that we had lived or breathed through before. And our businesses were struggling. This was before the furlough scheme came in. This was when we didn't know the certainty of what was going to happen or when it was going to happen. And we just didn't know what this pandemic was going to do. So at that point, Experience Oxfordshire took it upon themselves to undertake a business impact study on COVID-19 across the visitor economy. Next slide, please, Richard. And you will see here some of the results, and the full report of this is available online, and we can absolutely share it. And this is, bear in mind, this data was collected in April, and it's already a moving feast from April, of course. But we were losing in the region of £137 million a month in lockdown to Oxfordshire's visitor economy. 45% of our businesses thought that they might have to shut permanently within the next 3 months. And that wasn't shut temporarily for the season, it was shut permanently. And a large proportion of our businesses were reliant on the furlough monies to keep going. So there was a huge reality check when this came through. And that's really, I think, when Experience Oxfordshire started to step up. And we were sort of talking to government on behalf of our businesses, lobbying around the business support that was there, because we have always had a thriving visitor economy, and almost overnight that had stopped. And quite frankly, we don't know when that's going to get started again. But what we do know is that at the time of lockdown, people are sat at home looking for things to do. So we took some very proactive, very sensitive marketing at that point around #DreamOxfordshire. And that campaign is all around supporting local businesses. You can see a few of the sites. We've got a suite of over 20 graphics that you can use. But it was, let's shop locally. Shop locally online if we can. Many businesses have been able to diversify during this period. So let's support them. Let's buy a voucher for the future to help businesses with their cash flow issues. If you're a customer that's thinking about coming to Oxfordshire in the future, reschedule it, don't cancel it. Oxfordshire is a great destination to visit, but now is just not the time to do so. But let's keep planning for the future. It was really about becoming that sort of armchair tourist. And actually, how else can we support businesses? Yourselves, if you've been to any of our wonderful products and assets, our venues, our attractions, our hotels, our pubs, cafes, restaurants, retail, if you've done any of those things, have you left a positive review to support that business? Well, now's the time to do it. Let's give the businesses all the support that we possibly can. And again, it's around planning that future event when the MICE market opens back up. So there's lots of positive messaging. This has also been really supported by our partners, Jack FM, which again, if you're listening to their radio station at the minute, which I hope you all are, we've also done some real sensitive marketing to the local audiences around planning that future journey. So as lockdown lifts, Let's plan to get out and to those visitor attractions and those assets which are open again. But again, let's do it sensitively, because we don't know how they are going to look. So of course, we've moved on slightly. No matter what you think of this messaging, this is where we are now. It's around staying alert. And we're really looking at how we plan for the future, because the future is not going to look like this in destination management terms. We know that we're not going to be able to move around in the same way that we did previously, and we need to plan for that. We are constantly in touch with our venues and with our attractions and with our businesses, and looking at how they are going to open. I mean, you look at Blenheim Palace. Obviously, you already heard from Don this morning, but they very sensitively opened up their park and gardens, and it's phased ticketing, and that phased ticketing sold out really quickly, because we've got to be sensitive to what public distancing means, social distancing, and how people feel safe. We've got many other issues in terms of how we recover in terms of Oxfordshire's visitor economy. So if you go back to those statistics of that £2.3 billion expenditure into Oxfordshire's economy, the international visitors are only actually worth 10% of our total visitor numbers. However, that 10% is worth 40% of that visitor expenditure. They just spend in different ways. Their buying behaviour is totally different. And quite frankly, as you can tell from that 40% statistic, they spend more. When we're looking at recovery, it's very much going to be local first. And again, there's going to be some sensitivities around what that means. Many people have been off in a furloughed environment, perhaps not earning the money that they had before, and certainly not having the secondary spend. So how are they going to be able to afford to do all the things and have that leisure time? Then it's going to be domestic, and we move into real supply and demand issues there, because in destination management terms, we've always focused on the demand side of things. Generally, because we've looked at how do we influence the most productive type of visitor, how do we influence that multi-night stay, how do we get that overnight visitor. Well, actually, if businesses are being asked to open up because of social distancing at 30 to 50% of their capacity, which is a statistic that we've been using, but actually, having had a call with national government yesterday, we've been told that it may well be more like 15 to 30%. How can they possibly operate within those parameters? And will they open? So what supply do we have? How are we going to communicate the supply that we do have across Oxford and Oxfordshire? And that's another real issue in terms of recovery. And what quarantine will do is it's really going to prohibit that recovery of the international market. So if you are coming, say you're coming from the US, which is our biggest inbound market, we all know that they don't have the annual holiday allowance that we're fortunate enough to have across the UK. If they've got to come and then quarantine for 14 days, and quite frankly, they are just not going to do it. It's not worth that while. Equally, a large part of our short stay market is that near European market. And again, if they were planning a 2 to 3 night stay and they're asked to quarantine for 14 days, then they're not going to do it. So we've really got to look at how this potential quarantine that government is talking about is going to impact inbound visitors coming back in, and actually what that does for the national welcome. How will we be perceived as welcoming those visitors when they do come back in? Next, when we talk to businesses, there's a range of planning that they need to do going forward, and you can see all sorts of different iterations of what social distancing looks like here, and how businesses taking innovative ways or creative visuals to look at the messaging and the challenge of what that might be. But again, it goes back to people wanting to be safe. And, I've got a real aspiration for Oxfordshire as a destination that we are absolutely perceived as a safe place to visit. And there's a range of things that we can all do around that in terms of making sure that we are following the guidance. We're absolutely pushing that it becomes guidance and not advice. One of the things which will be coming through will be a charter mark for all businesses across the visitor economy. And we're involved in the national group, which is developing that, and it will be a self-assessment scheme. So there will be a minimum standard that consumers are expecting when they come to a destination. But come on, let's face it, we are Oxford, we are Oxfordshire. We can do better than that. Let's have a real ambition to be seen as a safe destination, and communicating that well to everybody that is thinking about coming to Oxford or Oxfordshire for a visit. So we've gone from a time of perhaps the visitor economy not being managed in the right way and attracting the wrong type of visitors. We moved on to having a really focused strategy and ambition for the destination. We've then gone into lockdown, where we've all had to, whichever one of the R's you're using, whether it's reset, restart, revisit, all of those things, whichever one you're using, we're really looking at that and trying to plan for how the city and the county can open up. Again, we are pushing for the guidance rather than advice. But let's get ahead of the curve. Let's make sure that we're a welcoming destination. Let's make sure that we're ready. And actually, if there could be any opportunity during a pandemic such as this, and I will use one of the R's, the reset, let's reset to make sure that we have got a destination that works hard and works well for everyone. Make sure that it is prosperous in terms of economic growth. Let's make sure that we have a well-supported infrastructure in the jobs market. Let's make sure that the locals feel part of it and that they can join in and they are welcomed in the same way. And let's really make sure that Oxfordshire is seen as that destination of choice going forward, and ultimately a great place to live, work, visit and do business. We've got a long way to go. It's going to be challenging. The visitor economy are going to perhaps be one of the hardest hit and the first to shut down and one of the last to open up. But let's together really try to work hard on what the future of Oxfordshire looks like in destination management terms.